All right, guys, in this video, I'm going to show you how one of my clients did $50,000 cash and I think about $70,000 or $80,000 contracted value from one single webinar. That means he went live for 1 hour, and because of that 1 hour, he was able to do $50,000, add that to his business revenue. And I'm going to break down exactly what we did on that revenue as his copywriter, what I put into the emails, what I put into the webinar script, and what actually went into the webinar slides because I designed all those as well. So I'm gonna make this video super quick and just show you guys what went into that so you can just copy it, because when I was trying to design this webinar, I couldn't really find that many videos that explained exactly what went into not just the webinar, the script, and the graphics, but also the promotional materials and the follow-up sequence. So I'm gonna show you guys exactly what we did and how we put those together and what the automations look like, all of that. And if you're wondering where I am, I'm just in another random Airbnb, the Nomad Lifestyle. So here's the view. It's pretty cool. We're filming outside today. There might be some bugs, so I might wind up running inside, but honestly, I think this is a pretty cool setup. So I'm gonna put you guys right here and let's just get into it. So I've got my laptop and the lighting is horrible here. Let's switch it. Let's go this way. Since you guys already saw the cool view, it doesn't really matter now. I can just have a wall behind me, switch it over here with the laptop. So yeah, let's start with the Loom, and I'll just show you guys like everything from the actual like webinar sequence emails to the webinar itself, and then also the landing page that we sent people to. So yeah, let's start recording on Loom. All right, so yeah, this is one of the webinar slides. Basically, this whole webinar framework was based on like selling with a story, and so everything here, go ahead and present, is story-based. Every component of the sales argument is either using a customer case study or my client's story himself, so that the CTA is just natural. It makes the whole sales process feel less icky when you can use stories to do it, because you're able to basically take a client case study, like one of his clients or his own case study, and be like, hey, if you guys want results like this, do this. That's the CTA. It's not like, you know, you're having to stack all these different like compelling arguments and do all this weird like icky salesy, you know, fake urgency. You're just able to like use stories. And we did use urgency. We did use like all that stuff, but it was so natural because of the stories. So let's get into it anyway. $50,000 webinar strategy. This is just like, I just made a presentation that will fly through because I want to show you guys like the actual webinar itself. But the framework that you're going to want to integrate into your webinar is actually scripting it and doing research so that you have a unique angle to base that script around. You don't want to just like present your offer for an hour straight. You want to have a unique angle both to your story and to the offer. So that unique angle might be, you know, objection that you're handling specifically on this webinar. It might be some aspect of your story or something, but you want to go and look at your audience, be like, what are they really struggling with? And how can I position this webinar as a solution to the problem that they have right now? All right. And then we had some email sequences that really helped us with like increasing the conversions after the webinar, but also increasing the actual show up rate on the webinar. And then incorporating urgency and scarcity so that people have a reason to actually take action on the webinar instead of waiting until, you know, whenever they feel comfortable taking action, because people will wait forever if you don't give them a reason to take action now. So you have to have urgency and scarcity. And we used two different methods to create urgency and scarcity. I'll just give them to you now so I don't waste your time. But number one was limited spots. So basically I'm going to explain to you what the bonus on the webinar was, but there's limited amounts of that bonus. And the second way we created urgency and scarcity was just having a limited time frame. So it was a 48-hour window after the webinar where the people in the webinar could access this offer. And so there was both limited time and limited amounts, and that created a lot of urgency and scarcity. All right. So the result of this was $50,000 cash collected, like I said, evergreen sales. So this is a webinar that I scripted once, created once, and created the automations for once, and my client can use it every single month to do the same thing. And he just did the webinar again today. The first time he did it, that he collected the 50K cash, was last month. He just did it again today and got even better, like an even better show up rate. So that's exciting. Yeah, obviously, like the sales calendar is fully booked, and then the contracted value, I don't know why it's not showing up here, but it was like I said, like 70, 80K contracted value. So this was like the core concept we came up with. So I did a bunch of research. I looked at what is his audience commenting right now. I went into his Instagram comments, his YouTube comments, and watched every single piece of YouTube content he had posted. And basically just looked at what are people actually asking for? What are they struggling with? What are the excuses they're giving? And that became the unique angle. It was that people didn't believe that they could create the results he had. And he's an entrepreneur. He teaches info. And so people didn't believe they could create an info business like his without a big audience. And now he doesn't have a crazy big audience, but he does have around like, might be like 60,000 subscribers. So like we still had to overcome that objection of like, how do I do the same thing as you without a big audience? and his name is Max Pearson if you guys want to look him up. But basically, we clarified, what is this offer? What is the actual offer of the webinar? Not just like the offer he's selling, but what are we promising people when we say, hey, we're hosting a masterclass on Saturday, here's what you're going to get. So we had to come up with an offer of like what the actual masterclass accomplishes, not just what his program accomplishes. That's a whole other thing. It's how to build your info product and how to make money online without an audience. That's great. But what does the actual webinar accomplish? Well, what we decided to do is basically give them the framework he had discovered after 12 months of testing different funnels, different frameworks, different strategies. And then he basically redid his entire funnel this year. And this was the first time he was going live to publicly share this new funnel. So it's like, basically, here's the newest funnel to help you scale your info product without an audience. That was the angle. And that came from a lot of like analysis of the audience, identifying the problem, and offer alignment, like I said. So let's get through that. Using the data. So we already did this. I reviewed sales calls. I already talked about this basically. Sales calls, did market research, looked at the top performing content, read all the testimonials, looked at his email metrics. That's an interesting one. I looked at all the top performing emails, the subject lines that were working, CTAs that were working, what wasn't working, and incorporated that into the webinar itself. And I also looked at past webinars, all of his past presentations that he had created that had been successful, and the ones that hadn't been successful, compared those and used that data to actually create this slide deck. Because I created not just the webinar script, but also the slide deck along with all the promotional materials. And so I'll get into that. But yeah, so the perfect webinar script is like a rough framework that I follow. That's Russell Brunson's webinar framework that he's used to create millions and millions of dollars. Like this guy does like millions of dollars on each webinar. So it's a pretty proven like framework. But that was just a rough outline that I used because it's proven to work. It uses the stories. And you can see here, this is just a snapshot of the slides, which I'll show you guys in more depth. But like you can see how many pictures are in here. It's because we're telling stories. This is the guy, Max, him with Sam Evans. We're telling his story, how he got started in info. Then we go in, we share case studies. We're telling other people's stories. And the reason we're doing that is because not everyone relates to his story. So we go and we share stories of people that are in different situations in life. This is a single mom. We share her story. Then I went and I found some other people that were, in different parts of the world, people that were different ages, people that were different, like technical backgrounds and different experience levels. And that just creates so many different places people can relate to. And so we have a diverse audience coming onto this webinar. We want to make sure all of them can envision themselves succeeding with his product, so that when we pitch it, there's not an objection of like, oh, well, I don't think my demographic or my age group can succeed. It's like, no, we already covered that. So anyways, origin story, that's where we build a connection and rapport with the audience. That's your story. At the beginning of the webinar, you're relying on your story to show the audience you're human and also do some objection handling for you just by being like, hey, I didn't have this, but I still made it work. That's objection handling. Content delivery, so we just like went through and actually gave them value so that even if they didn't buy, they could still go take action on what they learned in the webinar and get some value out of it. And then the offer pitch at the end was super natural because we're transitioning out of stories. So like I said at the beginning, when you're transitioning out of a story, it's basically just like, all right, you saw all these stories. If you want results like that, if you want the same system that got people from X to Z, then book a call. And that's how simple it is. And I'm sweating because it's so hot. I don't know if you guys can tell, but it is like one of the hottest weeks in like the New York, New Jersey area right now. And so I'm not complaining, getting the vitamin D. All right. So that's how we create the script. And then this is kind of like where we started to pitch here. After all the stories, and like I said, I'm going to show you guys the actual slides. So just hold on. If making money online is your goal, this may be the most important hour of your 2025. Establish some like importance. So I guess actually I'm going back to the beginning, but this is the stories. This is where we create some authority. So that's something you really want to do in webinars. Show why they should trust you. And you want to keep going back to this like throughout the webinar. I would say at least 3 or 4 times. You want to like go back to why you're an authority in the space. And you can do that with numbers. You can do that with like the time you spent, the amount of like research you've done, or whatever it is, whatever your niche is. You want to establish why you've been in the game longer than they have, and why, oh my gosh, I'm sweating, why they should trust you basically. And then here, this is more authority because we're sharing everyone else's results. We're showing how many other people were able to get results because of Max, because of his program. So more authority in the space. All right, let's go to the next one. The actual same sales framework. How do we actually get people to take action? Well, this is what we did. We handled the objection with stories. We used raw and honest sales copy. So we admitted different places where Max had to change or Max had to pivot or things that didn't work out for him. We shared businesses that, didn't work and like the changes he had to make, the pivots he had to take. And so we created a curiosity gap through all this, basically being like, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. And people are wondering, okay, how did you get, like we had talked about how much money he'd made, but they didn't know how he got in there. So we're creating this curiosity gap. We established the authority with all the proof that he's helped other people create. Stacked value. So we basically just allude to all the systems and solutions and things that he's learned in this period of like struggle, in this period of failure. And then we make an offer after we show all the solutions, all of the proof, all of the people that have won. And we use some urgency to actually trigger action. So we talk about there's 20 spots left, or there's only 20 spots in the first place. And then there's like a 48-hour time frame, and there's a limited bonus. So that's why they should take action now. And if you don't give people a reason to take action now, they simply will not. So this is kind of a breakdown of the story-based selling approach. You go through the problem first. You relate to the audience where they're at right now. So you want to establish that rapport like really, really early on of like, I've been where you're at. There's not an excuse that you have that I didn't. And then you go through the journey. You paint like a picture of maybe some of the things they've experienced, but they haven't quite gotten to yet. The transformation is what you get to at the end. So you go through the journey, you go through the solution, the breakthrough, that's what they want to have. And then the transformation is where you paint the picture of like their dream outcome. All right. The call to action for us, and I think for a lot of high ticket offers makes sense, is book a call. A lot less friction. And there's way more conversions when it's obviously less friction CTA. So that's just like plain logic, but higher conversion rate, the team is on the webinar, all the questions loop back to the CTA at the end. We open up for questions, and every single question, we loop it back to the CTA. We just give people another reason. It's like, oh, you don't have experience. That's why you should book a call with the team. Oh, you don't have an audience. That's why you need this blueprint. That's why you need the system. So every like excuse people who give looped back to the CTA. Limited spots that creates urgency, and then reiterated in the follow-up. So there's a whole follow-up sequence, which I'm going to show you guys right here, where we got a bunch of the sales. So part 3 of this whole like webinar framework is the email sequence. The emails serve 2 purposes. 1, get people on the webinar. Those are the pre-webinar emails. They build anticipation, get people to actually join. I also sent out like 2 blasts this morning to get people on the webinar again. So like an hour before and then at the actual start time. I think it was 30 minutes before that actual start time. And then post-webinar, there's a 4 email conversion sequence that gets people to book after. And we let them know on the webinar, this creates even more urgency. We basically let them know on the webinar that this is gonna get blasted out to the thousands of people on his email list. And that, like they already know there's 20 spots. Okay, this is getting blasted out to thousands of people. I should probably book before it gets blasted out, right? So pretty common logic there. The 4 email follow-up sequence looks like this. So basically we add them to the automation as soon as the webinar ends, and they get sent this like thank you email that promises the bonus again, talks about like everything that happened on the webinar for the people that didn't join, because there's some people on this list that registered but didn't join the webinar, right? So there's however many people registered, they all get sent this email. They all get offered the bonus because they registered. And then obviously the people that joined the webinar already know about the bonus, but we reiterate everything that happened on the webinar, go through the urgency again, basically just like reiterate the proof. Like I think there's 2 or 3 case studies we reiterate on the first email, and then the emails get progressively shorter. So it's like the webinar recap email, the value stack email that talks about like everything that they're going to get on the sales or on the actual like call. And then like it alludes to what's happening in the program, but it doesn't give the whole value stack of that. Testimonial and proof, that's email number 3. And then the final urgency is like a really short email that gets sent at the time of like the sale ending, basically, or at the time of the bonus closing out, 48 hours after the webinar. So that's the final push. All right. So going back through like the urgency and scarcity, I already kind of talked about this, but it's like we used actually 4 things: the time limit, which I said, the limited spots, which I said, bonus, already said that, but also a new offer. This is another kind of urgency you can create because it's kind of like built in. It's a very natural kind of urgency. It's like if there's a new strategy, that means that not everyone in the world knows about it. That means it's like, breaking news, whatever. But like the urgency is that people want to be part of this new strategy before it gets old, before it gets played out, before it's saturated. And so this being for the last 12 months basically meant that there's built-in urgency. So that was one of the things we used. And then the key success factors were the fact that we did so much research, used proven frameworks, and built the whole system. So we didn't just like build an awesome webinar. We also paired it with promotional emails and follow-up emails that were going to make sure that everyone, even the people that didn't join the webinar, were seeing this bonus. All right, so sum it up. Start with the research. If you know your audience, you're going to be able to come up with a unique audience or a unique angle, and you have to be able to go into the comments. You have to be able to spend hours actually looking at what are people looking at. If you're a copywriter, you should be watching every single piece of content that your client posts. Like, I'm sorry, there's no workaround like actually just doing the work. You can use AI, you can leverage all that if you want, but like you have to actually go and watch every single piece of content that they post if you want to be able to speak like them and you want to actually know their audience. And that's just like the truth of it. You want to script it out. So I start with the actual transcript. I start with the actual words that my client is saying, and then I go and I create the graphics, and I'll show you guys how I make it all look pretty. The emails that are going before and after, if you create an awesome webinar and you don't hype it up, then like nobody joins. So that's the truth of it. And then you go live, right? Like create a cadence so that your client can reuse this webinar every single month or every single week even, and that makes it even more valuable, and then you can charge a lot more money for it. So that's that. Let's actually like look at what this webinar looks like. And let me go to slide 1, because right now I'm at like, it's like slide like 40 or something. I'm at the end of the webinar. So let's open the navigator. By the way, look at how many slides there are. 155 slides. So this isn't something you do in like one evening. This is something you spend like weeks creating. And that's why it's something that like you can get paid a lot for. All right, so this is where you start with like a promise, how anyone can launch a profitable online course without a big audience. So that's the thing that you spend the most amount of research on. And then like I just create the build of a story. I go and I share case studies, build that credibility really early on. But I'm also building like relatability, showing how Max was like working a job 10 years ago and how he started his first business. It didn't work out. You know, he experienced some success, but didn't like his life. Relate to them there, overcome some objections. Go through and like you want to make this also look nice. So like when you're going through it, like this is using Keynote, but you want to actually make it like fun for people to watch. And that's why I like to use a lot of slides, because it keeps things moving really fast. So much proof here, right? Like you can use your story for a lot of proof if you don't have a lot of case studies, but Max actually happens to have a lot of case studies, so that makes it super helpful. But this is just kind of like a preview of what it looks like. On brand, super cool. Anyway, then we send them to the CTA, which is this page, right? So it's book a call. We actually sent them directly to book a call, but really cool page there. And this is what I actually started with. So you can see how much like work went into writing this script here. And like that's what it's going to come down to, is like how much time are you willing to put into a webinar, and how much time are you willing to put into the research for the audience to actually make sure this is going to resonate with the problem they're experiencing right now. Because if it's just like a pitch, then like people might log on once, but they're not going to buy. They're going to see right away, oh, the whole reason he put effort into this was just to make sales, not to actually help us, not to add value, not to build goodwill. You want your webinar to do both. You want it to build goodwill and make sales. And if you can't have the patience to build some goodwill before just like seeing a big paycheck, then you're not going to get either. You're not going to get goodwill and you're not going to get a paycheck. So that's the long story short. I've worked with clients who like really just want to pitch straight from the start, and like they don't want to spend the first 30 minutes of the webinar teaching and giving value, and that just like doesn't land. People feel it. And so that's the biggest thing I'll leave you guys with, is like figure out what your audience really needs, solve the problem live, and then have a natural CTA, because you just shared stories related to them, and it's going to not sacrifice any of the goodwill that you spent the first 30 minutes building, and like all of the other time that you're creating content before the webinar, all that goodwill, you don't want to lose it all on a live webinar. So that's the long story short. If you guys have any questions, comment them below, and I'll see you in the next video.